Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing well as well. Thank you. I'm recording from a client's office this morning over in St. Petersburg. So had to jump in with both feet to making up for lost time, that we spent in Dallas last week trying to keep the business rolling and keep my users happy.
Yeah, I like the pillars and the American flag in the background.
Yeah.
Very official.
Yeah. The fanciest office is one that is barely ever used. So I asked one of the department directors, I was like, hey, I need to do a Zoom call. Is it okay if I use that office? And yeah, it's mostly used for sort of ceremonial meetings that they have. They used to have every month, but because of COVID, don't want a bunch of people coming to a nursing home to engage in meetings when COVID's spreading around, and this community is particularly, older folks are more at risk than most.
Sure.
And so, yeah, this is a combination of storage and office space for consultants who need to do a private Zoom call / podcast recording.
I think you should do it every week from there. It looks nice. I like it. It's easy on the eyes.
Nicer than my camper? How dare you?
Yep. I'm going to tell you the truth. Yeah, it is a little bit.
All right. So how are you adjusting to life back in Florida?
I just got in yesterday, so
okay, yeah.
I'm still adjusting.
Still jet lagged from the 1 hour time.
From the 1 hour time difference, it does make a little bit of a difference. I was getting up really early. It was nice. Before I was leaving, I was up at around 5:30. I'd finally kind of scaled it back. Earlier and earlier and earlier. I was being productive in the morning, and then just that 1 week, that one little hour, and now I woke up a little bit later than I would like to today. So I definitely appreciate having time in the morning to get stuff done. I definitely operate much more efficiently than
my favorite.
7, 8 o'clock at night. My brain starts to shut down.
Oh, mine is usually shut down way before then. But my alarm went off at 5 a.m. this morning, and I stared at it for a couple seconds in disbelief. Like, there's no way it's already 5.
It's the worst feeling. The disbelief. It's like, what?
I know. Like,
it's what time already?
This must be some sort of mistake.
Right.
my Apple Watch that is synced to my Apple phone that is synced to, whatever the best time servers on the internet are. It's never wrong, but I still look at it like, there's no way.
Yeah, Apple, so, you've got a problem with your time server?
Yeah, you might want to get this ironed out. So everybody's asking me how Dallas was, and I keep telling them, like, well, the weather was pretty bad. It was either rainy and floody, or it was very, very hot. And so my late summer, early autumn travel that I love to do so much to get out of the Florida heat, Dallas did not scratch that itch in the slightest. It did not do that for me. But I started a road trip on Thursday from just north of Orlando where I live to Denver. And so I should get some. Let's take a look and see what the Denver weather looks like when I'm going to be up there. I'm kind of
before you speak. This weekend I took some walks outside, at least as I was doing a lot of digesting of all of the information we got from the conference, which was fantastic, but was pulling me in a lot of different directions, and I just forced myself to take those breaks as I was kind of summarizing everything on Saturday. And one of them, I try to get outside as much as possible. And it was amazing. Just a few minutes. I just walked around the block one time, before I started working again. Yeah. And just that little walk around the block, just being outside. It was hot and it was a little bit humid and really wasn't pleasant, but it definitely helped me recharge.
One of the things I loved about the time we spent in Dallas with, you being at the hotel that was sort of diagonal from the convention hotel, and me meeting you at your hotel, and us walking back to the hotel for lunch and coffee breaks, and I got my 10,000 steps just automatically every day of the convention. I didn't have to think about it or work on it at all. It just happened automatically, and I love when that's the case, where I don't have to say, okay, as much as I enjoy putting in my AirPods and listening to an audiobook or a podcast and walking around, those days where you don't have to think about getting the steps in are so nice, because it just does happen automatically. I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading an article. One of the guys I like to read, his name is Tom Venuto. He runs a blog called Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle, and he's very wordy, but he digs into the science quite a bit. And one of the things he said was a lot of what people are looking at now are different types of cardio for weight maintenance and weight loss. And one of the ones that is really emerging right now is just your active, your what you just described, right? Which is just not even thinking about it. It's just how active you are in terms of walking around. And so they're showing that for weight loss is just as effective, or sometimes even more so, than doing like high intensity interval training, because it's so short. Whereas if you have an active day, it's also a little bit, it could be more enjoyable, like, where you don't even notice it, and it's just because it's taking place over, potentially 8-10 hours. Whereas like a high intensity cardio session, it's just a few minutes, and it's intense at that point. But comparatively, it's probably a little bit less stressful, and overall you can do it more often by just the walking around. So we just got to find conferences to go to every week. That's all. That's the simple solution.
I could certainly enjoy that life. I'm already looking forward to the next podcast movement next year in Denver, at that resort, in Aurora. It's like set in the Rockies and stuff. And I like that podcast movement, unlike Podfest, moves around every year. So you get to visit a new city. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so as long as you and I are doing this, I see a very good possibility of just making that a recurring late summer thing where we take a week and we go to podcast movement wherever it is. I really appreciated the wealth of different types of sessions and different types of folks that they had showing up to talk, and the companies that would sponsor a track or sponsor a breakout session. I didn't feel like a single one of them was just a sales pitch.
Right.
I mean, obviously, they were invested in, hey, here's a need and here's how we fill that need. But I didn't feel like any of them just used the time to say, here's why you should buy our product. It was really, here's why you should engage in this practice, and here's why we think our product is a good way to engage in that practice. But I never felt any of them were too salesy.
Right. Yeah. And I appreciated that as well. You really saw that they were there for the value, and they're not dumb. They realize that, if you can we can become successful with a podcast, then we're going to have the money to spend with them. So why not bring us up and support us as much as possible? And it makes sense.
Any big takeaways from the conference that you want to share with our listeners to give them a little bit of a preview of what they might expect for us to be talking about or doing in the future?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we really need to focus on interacting more with the people that listen to us, and find ways that we can, help support them and make sure that we are delivering information that they find valuable or entertaining in some way, or useful, and just finding ways that we can facilitate those types of conversations. And there's a lot of different ideas that we pulled out from the conference on how to do that. And, I was just really kind of re-energized and recharged, with that kind of information. It also made me think and forced me to think, why are we doing this? Let's get specific, and how can we, and then who are we really trying to serve here? Who are we really trying to help? And that was good. That was my biggest takeaway from the conference, was just really trying to get clear about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're doing it for.
Yeah, and you and I had we circled and talked about that a little bit before we started recording today, and I'll share a little bit of my answer, because I hope that it resonates with people. My own experience has been when I guess step one is you got to figure out what are the things you can do in your life that will make it a better life. What can you do for yourself that makes you feel like you're experiencing the positive things that life has to offer. And for me, and we've talked about this list before, we did a whole series on the things that we feel like we need to do on a daily basis to feel like we're living that best life. And for me, it's going for walks, it's learning new things, it's meditating, it's exercising my body, It's journaling. And when I do those things, I feel like I'm living more of the life I was meant to live. And so if I can, share those practices and make a good case for those practices to other people and other guys specifically, then they can be out there living a better life too. And if you've got all these men who are focusing on living a good life and focusing on better mental health, then it doesn't take 100% of men in the world. We don't need 4 billion guys all doing those things to make a marked improvement in the quality of life that every person on the planet has. If there are guys that are out there focusing on living healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally healthy lives, then it's going to impact everybody else that they deal with in a positive way. And I think that you and I, because of the technology of podcasting and the ability of just, guys like us to buy a couple microphones and put a message out there to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, I think we're in a position where we might have some good things to say that can help people out. And hopefully we do it in a way that they want to keep listening and maybe try out some of the things we're suggesting.
Well said.
Thank you. It was all off the cuff, I promise. So yeah, that's what you and I are trying to do. And I do feel like the convention we went to gave us a really good opportunity to sort of to zero in on the why, the what, and the how, and come up with some ways to make that happen.
Yeah. And as time goes on, in the next few weeks, we're going to be meeting you and I to try to get even more clear on, what that looks like and how we're going to do it. And I'm excited for that because I've got some pretty good ideas and that I put together in my brainstorming session on Saturday. So yeah, I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, one of the messages I kept hearing over and over again, to the point where now I feel like I have to believe it, is this idea that they're very well. I mean, we only get a couple hundred listeners per episode. It's nothing, it's not blowing my mind at this point, but I think there's potential to grow. But even among that small community of a couple hundred people, there could be people out there that are super into what we're doing and want to support it in some way. And my anxiety or my reluctance to offer people a way to support us, you could make an argument that that's selfish. That the part where I don't,
I think I have. I remember that conversation. I think I do. All right, keep going. Yeah.
Yes,
right. I'm glad you remember this. This is good.
The idea that my reluctance to quote unquote ask people for money could be getting in the way of them feeling like they're supporting and participating could be perceived as selfish on my part. And there's definitely a wide range between giving people the opportunity to support something that they're excited about and begging for money. And for a long time, I've had a hard time seeing the difference between that.
So the word I didn't when I was talking to you about this, I didn't use the word selfish. I think I used the word arrogant, right? Where it's kind of like,
don't those often go hand in hand?
Well, no, not necessarily. No. For me, it's very different, right? So selfish would be, kind of saying, hey, you're not giving enough support. You're a listener, right? You're not giving me enough. Whereas arrogance to me is kind of like you're making the assumption that somebody doesn't want to, you are assuming that somebody doesn't want to give back, somebody doesn't find enough value in us. And to say basically like, yeah, I got you figured out, to me that's a little bit arrogant to go, yeah, I know everything you're thinking and feeling and saying, right? So that's kind of what I was saying is we don't know, we really don't know, but let's create the opportunity to find out. That's all.
Yeah, the selfish part, I think, comes in where my attitude is, hey, people may want to be included in what we've got going on, but to extend that opportunity to them, I have to make myself a little uncomfortable.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. And no, screw them. I'm not going to make myself uncomfortable so they don't get a chance to get involved. That's the part where the selfishness comes in.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see if I'm able to make some progress in that direction and do it in a way where I don't feel like where the listener and me, we both don't feel like I'm begging for money.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
So yeah, we'll see what comes of that. But one thing I will beg for right now is hey, if you like what we're doing, go ahead and just at least give us a rating. You don't have to write a long review for us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever, but give us a rating. Go ahead and drop some stars for us. If you think we're really good. If you don't like us, then you can go ahead and skip that part. You don't need to
I want it all. I don't care how many stars you give us, as long as it's honest, because that's the only way we're going to get better.
Not me.
We'll hide that from Charles.
If you want to complain about the quality of our work, just do that in the form of a comment on Dan's Instagram. But if you like everything we're doing, then give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, assuming it's out of 5. If it's out of 10 on whatever app you're using, then I don't want a 5-star review.
I'm going to ask for an 11. All right. Yeah. So
one of the things I had to deal with when I was a technical trainer was we had to get surveys from students after every class, and it was on a 7-point scale, and there were many students who, mostly older guys, who had the attitude of 7's perfect and nobody's perfect, so I'm not giving you a 7. And it's like I had to change my introduction at the beginning of the class to make it clear. 7 out of 7 is considered adequate by the people that write my check. So I appreciate that you have deeply held principles about how nobody's perfect, but my boss doesn't share those. And so he wants to see a 7 or I get in trouble.
That's fair. I mean, being transparent and honest is important.
Yes, absolutely. So it's like, if you can't bring yourself to give me a 7 out of 7, right, just take the whoops. Sorry, my Italian gesticulating knocked over the microphone. If you can't find into your heart to give me a 7 out of 7, just ball up that piece of paper and throw it in the garbage. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, if you like us, rate us. If you don't like us, just keep it to yourself.
So wait, what were you just doing on the mic? You were gesticulating. What could you not do that in public, please? Just try not to gesticulate in public.
I'm half Italian.
I guess I don't know how public it is. We only have 200 listeners, right?
Asking an Italian not to gesticulate is like asking an Italian not to masticate.
Oh, good one. Good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you masticate on anything good over during the conference?
Well, we had In-N-Out Burger, which we posted on our Instagram. I was really excited to get In-N-Out. It cost us. I had to leave the parking garage and then come back in, but it was totally worth it. Definitely better than the 20-minute walk to Smash Burger or Shake Shack.
Yeah,
especially in that Dallas heat where a flash flood was about to break out any second while we were out there. So In-N-Out Burger was great. We ate at that little chicken place in the atrium where your hotel was a couple times. And, the second day it kind of felt like I had a brick in my stomach, but it was tasty. So it was worth it.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did we, we made that trip to Texas Roadhouse that one night. Right.
That was surprisingly good filet for sure.
Yeah. And the Hard 8 barbecue. God.
That brisket was so delicious. It's making me consider getting a smoker here for the house. Just it was just so fantastic. I've never had anything like that.
I would definitely I would support your desire to get a smoker. That could be good. I hear those green eggs are pretty nice. Have you dealt with those at all?
I've seen somebody use one. It looks like a lot of work. I'm not about the work though, and it takes a long time to get to temperature, and then to cook it. There's a lot of work involved. I'm not leaning towards a green egg. I started to look at some other ones like
look at the Traeger at all. Yeah, the Traeger the pellet grills are supposed to be real nice.
Yeah, so I need to look into that. But I do want to do a little bit more research about how bad it is in terms of health wise to consume a lot of smoked foods. I don't have a good grasp on that just yet. I'm getting some conflicting type of information about that. And so I need to look into that. So,
well, I know that with the pellet grills, at least the wood that they use for the pellets, it's just wood. They don't put anything like extra, any kind of glue or anything to make the pellets. It's just wood.
It's more about the actual smoke itself. Right. Does that cause some sort of carcinogens and things like that? But then again, I'm seeing stuff if it's like low and slow, it's not quite as bad, or it might be okay. And so I need to dig into that a little bit more before I throw down over $1,000 on something like that.
Let me know what you come up with. because I don't do much low and slow. I have a fairly small grill, and it doesn't really lend itself well to indirect grilling even. So
Okay.
like I'm not slow cooking ribs or turkeys or anything like that. It's pretty much just steaks and burgers and chops. You just put them on right over the flame, and then flip them, and within 20 minutes, I think is the longest I've cooked anything in my little grill. So that is the opposite of low and slow, right?
Yeah. So that I know should only be done occasionally, just with the high heat and the charring and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Even though it's delicious.
Oh, it is. All right. Anything else you want to cover before we get into the next TED Talk that we watched and we want to talk about?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So I will introduce it and give everybody a link to it, like I did for the last one. This one's called "Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough," and it's by Justin Baldoni, who's a podcast host, but his main background is in acting. He's an actor, and he did this TED Talk about.
He's mostly known from I guess his character Raphael in the Jane the Virgin TV show.
I've never seen that. Have you watched an episode?
I've seen a couple of minutes of it. I've not watched a whole episode, to be fair. But he's a guy who's in pretty good shape, and he's an actor, and he's played a lot of like shirtless roles.
Yes.
Like a shirtless medical student and a shirtless steroid using con man. But he's known mostly for, I think, the Jane the Virgin TV show.
Yeah, when he mentioned the name of the character, I know he got a bit of a pop there. The audience applauded, so I assumed it must be on a show that it has some popularity, but one that I've not seen. So
yeah,
that checks off. I've heard of Jane the Virgin, but I haven't watched it. So that sounds appropriate.
Yep.
So I found it interesting that as a guy with a career as an actor, he sort of brought that into the talk that he gave almost immediately to say to make it. Draw the parallel between being an actor and the pressure we feel to act like men, for whatever that means, and that definition obviously changes quite a bit culture to culture, but there is that pressure to perform and to decide what a real man is, and then figure out every day how we need to act that way so that we get the approval and acceptance mostly of our guy friends, but not totally. I mean, there is certainly you get rewarded for acting like a man in a lot of ways by your relationships with women as well.
Right. Yeah. And he made this TED Talk because he was, playing a lot of actors who are like oozing this machismo, this power, this charisma. Right. And he said in the talk that it's not actually how he sees himself,
right.
But that's because Hollywood was seeing him that way. And, as you mentioned, it sounded like, and he didn't say this flat out, but it sounded like because he was playing this role so often, that started to kind of bleed over into his personal life and how he was actually thinking and behaving, when he wasn't acting. And, and it kind of, it's, in his case, it really wasn't a good thing, but it really helped me reinforce the idea of the whole fake it till you make it type of scenario, or, if you're trying to make a change, act as if, right? So,
sure.
Same thing. If you want to be, let's say, like less anxious, at parties, you could think of how would a TV character playing a role who's somebody, who is not anxious at parties, how would they behave? What would they think about? What would they say? How would they hold their body, right? How would they walk? How would they speak? And you do that enough, and it starts to kind of become your own identity. And that's incredibly powerful for us if we're trying to make any type of changes, So,
sure.
and this guy basically is kind of like a living example of that. He started to kind of pick up some of these, traditionally, toxic masculine habits in his own life.
Yeah, I found it interesting when he talked about, the performing that one does to gain the acceptance of their friends, even as little boys. And it got me thinking about really, one of the worst insults when I was a kid, like I'm talking like second, third grade, was, we had no real concept of what it meant to be gay, but it was still already an insult by that age, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And to refer to one of your friends as being girly was also like one of the worst insults that you could throw at a fellow little boy or hear from another little boy. And it got me thinking that, one of the questions I'm always interested in is, how much of our behaviors that we engage in en masse are biological versus cultural. How much of the way that we decide what it means to be a man is a function of our biology, and in large part, due to testosterone that starts surging when we hit puberty, and how much of it is just messages we get from our friends, from our family, from the media, and it's hard to know. I mean, a lot of different people have a lot of different opinions about how much is nature, how much is nurture, but it did strike me as this idea of any of the aspects of being a person that are sort of associated with femininity being discouraged and insulted when your little boys just playing on the playground or sit in the locker room. What does that do to our view of femininity? And then in the case of you and I and most straight guys, it's like we grow up with this thing where we're insulting each other or teasing each other at the very least for any behavior we see as feminine. But then our whole goal is to find someone, meet someone, and spend the rest of our life with someone who is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we reconcile that, where we grow up with this hostility to feminine behavior in our fellow boys and men, but then we want to form a life where we spend the vast majority of it with somebody who embodies these same behaviors? And it does seem that we, as a society, we've kind of painted ourselves in a little bit of a corner in the West, where we have those things that are those competing values. And I'm sure that they have something similar they deal with in Eastern cultures. I'm not saying that they've got it all right and we've got it all wrong, but it is kind of an interesting paradox where you make fun of your fellow schoolmates for acting girly or whatever, wearing a pink shirt or whatever it is when you're little kids, and then reconcile that with, I want to spend all my time with this woman that I've fallen in love with and build a family with her. And she embodies these behaviors that a few years ago I was making fun of my friends for showing off a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's a problem there that needs to be fixed. I just find it interesting. And I guess, yeah, there probably is a problem there that needs to be fixed. I don't know what the solution is, but it does strike me as a little bit odd that we hold feminine behavior in such high regard in one way and such low regard in another way. And why is that? What's the cause, or what's the root of that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is related to, the messages and the things that are being taught to little boys and little girls, at a young age, and I think that's where they get those ideas and those notions of what's masculine, what's feminine, and what's strong and what's weak and things like that, and then who typically, exhibits those types of behaviors. I think a lot of that is really taught. I don't, I think, boys and girls have different, obviously biologically they're different, and,
right.
They've got different hormones and things going through their bodies. And I think it's important to teach them how to channel that, the urges and the feelings and everything else that those hormones and those differences create. And I think the important thing here is, what are the stories? What is the teaching that's going on to those children when they have those types of, displays of their hormones, or, and how they express them. Right. And I think that's where the story needs to be changed.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that, a lot of that sort of juvenile teasing, and a lot of that happens before the hormones even kick in, where it's sort of emulating behavior of older boys and older people, because when you're 6-7 years old, there's hormonally, there's obviously stuff that happens in utero that makes you a male or a female.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, before your sexuality even really exists, or your identity as a particular gender is heavily influenced by your biology, little boys and little girls are still kind of living out that boys have to be brave and girls have to be pretty, and that's the way it is. And if you don't match up to that, then whatever the or else is yet to be determined for you. And I agree. I mean, and that's one of the things I liked that he mentioned and he put a focus on in this TED Talk, is the idea of, raise your kids to be good humans first.
Right.
And, these gender differences will work them out based on, a combination of biology, interest, nature, and nurture sort of coming together and making you the person that you're going to be. But let's remove any of the unnecessary and additional roadblocks that we're throwing in people's way so that they can live out who they actually are without feeling like they have to be these performers.
Right. And, he even says, he goes to say, I don't just want to be a good man. I want to be a good human.
Right.
And so that's something to think about too, is these days that nothing exists in isolation, right? And that includes, and especially society, and meaning, so, as we get older, we need to, as men, we need to basically be able to think about how can we best, I guess, how can we best be a human? I guess it's a horrible way of saying it, but what's the best way we can do that? And that means we have to be able to, relate to women and bring the best out of them and bring the best out of us to work together, and in order to be the best human we can be.
Yeah. And I think that, I was thinking about this the other day, as far as the moral or ethical obligations that we have as men. I can't really think of any areas where, the fact that I was born with the chromosomes or the genitals that I was born with, I don't know that has a direct impact on what it means to be a moral or ethical person. Like, just because I'm a man or just because somebody else is a woman, I don't see that there's really a dramatically or really any difference in a standard of behavior. It's everybody's job, as I see it, to stand up for the little guy or the little girl, take care of people who are weaker than you or people who got a bad luck deal in life. It's everybody's obligation to be honest, to be straightforward, to treat others the way they want to be treated. And I don't see that there's really any of that ethical responsibilities we have. I don't see that as men, we have certain things that we're morally obligated to do, and women have things that they're morally obligated to do. I feel like the role of just being a good person is everybody's responsibility. But the way that you are interested in living out those good ethics or those good morals can be different based on your sex or your gender.
Yeah. I think also your individual experiences through life, right?
Sure, that too. Yeah.
I think that has a huge deal, and he even talks about the fact that, that men do communicate, and we can, but it's not about, but it's usually not about our feelings, right? It's sports or women or, that's, or drinking or whatever, right. That's where we're comfortable talking. We can communicate in that way. Just that a lot of us don't have the experience of communicating and, about our feelings and figuring out how to do that.
Right. And so, yeah. And one of the things I thought about when he said that was, so if you want to say that having lifelong, close, intimate friendships where you can talk to your friends about anything, if you want to say that's a feminine trait, then by all means, I want to be more feminine in that regard.
Yeah.
Because that is what I want with my masculine friendships. I want the ability to be able to have somebody who's my friend for a very long time and feel like I'm comfortable and supported talking to them about any, celebrating any good things or going to them for support for any of the difficult things in life. That's what I want out of my male friendships. And if somebody has decided that that's a feminine value or a feminine trait, then okay, fine, call it that if you want to, but that's something I definitely want.
Yeah. And I think these days the word feminine or masculine is such a trigger word, and it evokes so many, responses and feelings and meanings. And, we've been between what we've been taught and what, we've really inherited as well in terms of teaching, from our ancestors and everything else, that for me anyway, it's helpful to me to not label something as masculine or feminine, but rather, does this make you a better human or a worse human? Right.
Sure.
Like, what does this help you become a better person or better human or not? Right. And I try not to say, or even think about, that's, because I talk about my feelings or whatever, that makes it feminine or that we need to now call that masculine. Right. Let's not I don't think it's a great idea to try to change somebody's idea of saying, hey, this is no longer a feminine trait. This should be embraced as masculine. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but to me, it's easier to say, well, let's call it all human, right? Let's just say, hey, being able to communicate how you're feeling about things so you don't lash out, you don't explode, or you don't do something stupid.
Right.
That's a good human thing to do.
No, absolutely.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. I think you're dead on with that. I think that, these things that people who came before us and have died a long time ago and have decided are masculine or feminine, they were influenced by the society they lived in, the culture they came from, and what their parents taught them. And, like so many things, life should be treated like a gin rummy hand, where when you get a good card, you decide to keep it. And when you get a bad card, you decide to let it go. And I feel like that's what we should do with a lot of the traditions that have been kind of just passed down to us. I saw a meme the other day that somebody referred to tradition as peer pressure from dead people.
It's crazily accurate, though,
isn't it? And so there are some of those that are really great, and they promote a sense of community and a sense of family, and they should absolutely be kept alive and passed on to our kids because they make the world a better place. And there are some of them, where, like I've talked about it in these terms before, where our software of our culture and society has kind of moved past some of our hardware. And there's always going to be that difference between the bodies we have, the digestive systems we have, the metabolisms that we have. A lot of those are holdovers from back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers, right? And so our body doesn't know exactly how to deal with the fact that we've experienced an agricultural revolution where we can have as many carbs and as many sugars and as many whatevers as we want to these days. And sometimes they're the cheapest foods to acquire by, spending our time in the middle of the grocery store instead of around the outside. And so I feel like the same thing has happened with a lot of our traditions and a lot of our cultural directives where, we're running based on, some old stories that just aren't true anymore. And some of them are, and we should hold on to those and we should still engage in those. And some of them are not, and we should be the generation that says, okay, this isn't working for us anymore. I think we need to let these go.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to get into with you, because I think we've had some interesting parallel experiences from what he was talking about. In some ways, I was raised by my maternal grandfather, and he didn't check off some of the traditional masculine boxes because he was older, because, he suffered an accident at work. So he had some disabilities that he struggled with. And so there were a lot of the things that when you look at traditional masculine role models, he didn't check those boxes off. And you and I have talked about your dad, and we've had your dad on the show before. There's some ways where he doesn't check those off either.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that Justin was talking about. His own father, didn't, do things that were traditionally masculine, like such as hunt or fight, or manservant. Same thing with my dad, didn't teach me, or fixing a car, work with my hands, things like that, and so and part of me, just like Justin, did feel a little bit like I was kind of let down. Like I didn't have the background or the tools, or even, to be honest with you, get passionate about sports. I'll go to, live sporting events all day long. It's wonderful, but I don't, I tend to stay away from, sports discussions. I don't stay on top of it. I don't make an effort to be knowledgeable what's going on in the sports world. And part of that, and because of that, sometimes I feel like I can't connect with certain guys because that's where they lead with. That's what they lead with, But one thing that I am grateful for is that every time, there was a problem, I did something wrong. My dad punished me for whatever reason, maybe I mouthed off or did something wrong. He would then come and talk to me about it afterwards. I remember many times I'd be like crying in my bed because I was upset because I got yelled at or I got a smack on the butt for doing something wrong. But then he would come in a few minutes later and then talk to me about it. So that subconsciously implanted in my mind that it's good to talk about things. Things get better when you talk about them. Doesn't mean I got the greatest skill set at being able to do it. And I still struggle with that from time to time, but that is one of the things that, I valued. And he also, he's a therapist. And so I don't know if this was genetic or I picked that up, but I tend to listen. When I have conversations with people, I like to listen and ask questions and hear more. And, sometimes that bites me in the butt because I kind of get stuck talking to somebody, that kind of keeps going and going. But again, those are the things that, the other ways of connecting, other ways of communicating, that, I am grateful for that my dad taught me.
Yeah, and it was interesting how when he talked about his dad, not having some of those traditional characteristics that he felt like he might have gotten a little ripped off on, that he didn't have a dad that did X, Y, or Z. It was interesting that what his dad did carry on from his father's father was this idea of suffering in silence. And when you're going through something rough, you just keep it to yourself and you sort of put your head down and you just grin and bear it.
Yeah, not good.
But it does seem, regardless of whether your dad's into cars or sports or, spending time outdoors, so many dads, whatever way that they're not traditionally masculine in, they do seem to somehow pick up on that idea of if something's bothering you, you keep it to yourself. And, we have seen something that has in some ways goes in the other direction, which it can, go in the other direction in an unhelpful way, if not unhealthy, where, I've got some friends on Facebook that they are more comfortable describing deeply personal things that they're going through on social media for anybody that they're friends with in a level that I would never be comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether my discomfort in seeing that is a function of my health or my lack of health. I don't know if it's, when somebody goes through something and they put it out there in great detail, particularly men, but I'd say it makes me a little uncomfortable when women do it too, where I'm like, wow, they are really just putting it all out there, and it makes me uncomfortable. And I don't know if I'm uncomfortable because I'm uncomfortable with myself and my ability to do that, or whether, they're getting into the territory of it being unhelpful and maladaptive behavior. I don't know, but I know it bothers me when I see people go a little too personal and stuff, and I don't know exactly where that's coming from inside of me, but it definitely does give me pause and make me feel a little awkward.
Yeah, I think some people are just able to be more vulnerable than others, and we talk a lot about when. For you and I specifically, we wouldn't necessarily do that. We look for safe people, safe spaces, and that inherently to me, putting things out in public, it's not necessarily, there's no guarantees of it being a safe space if everybody can see it, right? And then but that person might be okay, handling some negative criticism or feedback, and that's just maybe you and I just are not wired that way, and that's okay. It doesn't necessarily be you don't need to put everything out on social media when you're having a problem, and Justin even talks about that. What he did was he went on a 3-day trip with his guy friends, and it wasn't until the third day before he could actually express to them what was going on.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always going to keep in mind from now on when we talk about vulnerability is something we heard from the two ladies at the talk that we went to. I think it was on the last day about neuroscience, where vulnerability isn't necessarily self-disclosure. So just putting your private business out for the world and telling the world things about yourself that typically people wouldn't share,
that's fair.
That in and of itself isn't necessarily vulnerability,
right? So what do you think that could be? If it's not vulnerability, what are they doing it for?
That's a good question. Is it I don't know, is it attention seeking? Maybe
Yeah.
Is it vulnerability? It could be.
Could it be to feed your ego, right? Maybe.
Yeah, I think there are probably some people that share deeply personal things to a wide audience because they're looking for people to say, "Oh, they're there. You're okay. You'll be fine. You're strong. You're powerful. You're whatever." And because, it does feel good to be told that. I would say, in my own life and what works for me, and I'm not saying that this is how everybody should be, just kind of hearing that from strangers, you're strong, you're attractive, you're a valuable person. Just hearing that from strangers where I don't know exactly what their agenda is doesn't do much for me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like,
yeah.
only hearing that from people who I've invested in and they've invested in me, and I care about their opinion and I care about their judgment, and I know that they're not just going to butter me up because they're looking to get something out of me. Those are the people that I want to hear that from, not just, these people that I ran into one time at a party. So we friend requested each other, and now they're telling me that I'm strong and I'm special. It's like, you don't know that I'm strong or special. I don't care to hear it from you.
Right. Yeah. And that's you. And it, because I don't know.
That could just be me.
And again, it could just, some people, if it gets them over the hump of, being upset and sulking and stuff like that, even if it's from strangers that, kind of cheering you on a little bit, if it gets you to that next point. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. It just may not be what you need.
Yeah. I did want to talk about something he mentioned in the TED Talk, where he mentions the idea that, roughly 1 in 5 women have experienced some level of sexual assault.
Mm.
And I don't know anybody who would say that number is not way too high. A few years ago, I decided to dig a little deeper into that number. And the interesting thing that I found was that, and this really kind of confirmed something that I suspected, which may mean I need to do a little bit deeper research into it. But those 20% of women that have been the victim of a sexual assault, how many guys are responsible for that? I mean, obviously the easy answer is too many. Mm-hmm. But what I found is that sexual assault that happens to both men and women is done by 5% of the men. Mm. So 95% of guys are out there not sexually assaulting people, right? But 5% of them are responsible for all of the sexual assault that happens. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, what do we do about that 5%? I mean, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be you. I don't believe it would be our sons if we have some. You and I don't travel in a social circle where that kind of behavior would be met with anything other than disgust and harsh criticism, right? But that must not be true for everybody. There must be environments where, the idea of, I took a girl out, I got her a little too drunk and I got lucky, or whatever, crude phrase you want to use, where that's, not only tolerated, but encouraged.
Right.
And, it's interesting. You and I have had conversations before about when we, for New Year's, we sit down at a bar and some guy talks to us. And the first thing he wants to do is start bragging about not his conquest with women, but how much he's achieved in business. Mm-hmm. Or how, we're just two guys. We're just strangers. And immediately the first place a guy has to go to is start bragging about something that he's achieved. And I think both you and I react to that like, what's going on right now? What are you trying to do? And I feel like that attitude of, why are you trying to butter me up and impress me with these things you've accomplished? That certainly needs to find its way into the locker room, where if some guy starts bragging about, either his completely consensual prowess with women, or something he did that was shady, or something he did that was outright disgusting, the attitude needs to, I think, be, listen, why are you telling me the story to try to impress me right now? This is not what impresses me. Impress me by showing me how you are able to regulate your own emotions, or how you've sacrificed to help somebody else out who was in a bad spot. That needs to be the kind of pressure that we put on our peers. Show me, tell me about the time, or show me the way that you're a good person who is willing to do the right thing when it's not easy, instead of, trying to impress me with how many women you've slept with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard to connect directly to this, Dan, because you and I believe, have curated social circles where that kind of behavior, those kind of stories are not encouraged or even really tolerated. They're not tolerated in the, when me, you, Rob, Kurt, Richard, these guys are hanging out, nobody's being impressed by creepy stories about something you did to a girl.
Yeah, I think obviously this is a multi-layered type of situation here in terms of things that could be done or should be done, and I think one of the ways is changing or helping to help guys figure out other ways to connect with other men other than bragging about something in general. Like I bristle at anybody who's bragging about anything. Honestly, it doesn't matter what it is. So business women or what money or whatever that is, immediately I bristle. So, for me, in my mind, I think one of the better things or more effective things, at least that would make me happier, is helping to have other, come up with other ways for guys to connect. And I like something that, Kurt had said is, if you want to be interesting, be interested. And that, he uses three, he asks somebody three questions. And a lot of times I find myself, when I want to connect with another guy, I find myself defaulting to asking something about them and letting them talk, and so that might be something we kind of try to come up with is, what are some questions, and again, then that route goes back to, is somebody, have enough self-confidence in themselves to say, I'm okay without talking about myself. I don't feel the need to prove myself to somebody else. I'm okay asking questions about them and actually listening and paying attention and maybe getting crazy and asking a follow-up question. Right. Yes. And it takes, and then the question is okay, so then what's causing that insecurity if they're not able to do that? Or if they feel like, what's causing them to feel like they need to prove something to somebody else, a complete stranger, for example, in order to connect with them. Right. And so then it kind of, like I said, it kind of goes deeper, right. And, kind of like a nice croissant, it's all flaky, lots of
yes. Yeah.
Lots of layers.
I mean, when they say, show me, don't tell me, that's absolutely true. If you're charismatic, if you're attractive, if you're successful, if you're the kind of person that I would be drawn to, deal with in a friendship, a business relationship, a romantic relationship, whatever, it doesn't happen by you telling me how great you are. Mm-hmm. It happens. You just be you, and I'll make my determination of whether I think you're great or not, or whether you're the kind of person that I'd like as a friend, a business partner, a romantic interest, whatever. And I think too many guys, do go out there in the world feeling this pressure of, I've got to sell myself. No, nobody's going to toot my own horn. Nobody's going to toot my horn for me. I have to toot it myself. I have to go out there and sell and convince people why I'm worth being around, or why I'm worthy, or why I've achieved this, that, or the other. And that is an impulse that I think we need to encourage ourselves and other men to let go of. Just go out there and be you. Don't try to sell yourself to other people, and they will decide whether you're worth spending time around or not. And certainly, don't think you have to go out there and brag about, how many women you've slept with, because that doesn't impress me. I don't need to know your number. I don't need to know what you do to score. I don't care. That's probably the least interesting thing about you. Tell me something, that you, I don't want to say tell me something you don't want me to know, but let the real you come through in a way where you're not trying to sell yourself to me. And I'm going to be more likely to want to hear what you have to say and hang out with you, for sure.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of the reason why that doesn't happen is because, growing up, we heard, as children, anybody trying to, you're acting, you're acting gay, you're acting like a girl, or whatever that is. Anytime they, as a way of just because the kid who was saying it was probably uncomfortable in some way, right? It was saying that stuff, but then that kind of translates, and that becomes like, and especially if it's said to you in public, that becomes like an emotional, a response. And we tend to remember things that we have strong emotions, right? That are tied to strong emotions. So then that probably it subconsciously kind of plays in the back of your head when you are trying to connect with somebody and you say, hey, listen, it's safer for me to go to, talking about, bragging about how much money I make, or how much, how good I am with women, or whatever that is. That's a safer, more typically masculine type of topic. So if I'm going to connect with a complete stranger, my guess is I have a better chance of being accepted and liked by the other person if I go with one of these quote unquote safe topics rather than something that is actually of value.
Yeah. I'm reminded of something in, remember we talked about Liz Plank's TED Talk last week, And there's something in her book For the Love of Men that I found to be really interesting, and I think it's an easy call to action. She was talking about a researcher, I believe, where he did a study where he got some guys together and said, what words do you associate or do you think of when I say a good man? And they would go down the list of, honest, dependable, secure, blah, blah, blah. And then he would say, okay, what words do you think of when I say a real man? And that was a very different set of words. And I want to live in a world where a real man and a good man have the same describing characteristics.
That's interesting.
Where real man, there were things about, strength and domination and good with the ladies and like stuff like that was a real man, where honest, dependable, secure, things like that came up with the word a good man. And wouldn't it be a better world if the definition of both of those things were the same? Because one is obviously performative and the other one is real.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how to get us there, but I suspect listening to our next episode and rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is probably a step in the right direction.
Wow, you slipped that one right in. That's great. That's great.
All right. Yeah. Any other points from the TED Talk you want to mention?
Yeah, I just want to get your opinion on the fact that he was talking about on his social media. He posted a picture of him and his girlfriend or wife kissing.
Yeah,
and
I love that story.
One of his fans had tagged her boyfriend in it and said, "Hey, kind of check this out. Like, this guy's not afraid to talk about, to show that he loves his wife or girlfriend, online." And his response was, "Please stop tagging me in this gay shit. Thanks."
Yeah.
The boyfriend. And so, so basically Justin reached out to the guy and was just like, "Hey," wasn't confrontational, was just like, "Hey, I just out of curiosity, what did you mean by this? I'm trying to learn, what's going on." And he actually, he wrote back and he said, growing up, public displays of affection were looked down on for this guy. And so, he was really, that made him very uncomfortable to see that. And it also made him uncomfortable, that his girlfriend would tag him in it, and it, kind of brought it out into the public.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to get your take on that, what he just described right there.
Yeah. I love that story. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole talk, where, he said, where the guy had this reaction because the guy felt like he had to perform, like, hey, I've just been, I'm sure his girlfriend's intention was not to call him out in public, but that's what he felt like had happened. Like, the idea of, hey, here's a way that I would like you to be, or something like that. And he immediately felt attacked and defensive and felt like he had to distance himself from that behavior by, saying what he said, which, you think about it for 2 seconds and it makes no sense. What is quote unquote gay about a picture of a guy posting, a picture of a guy kissing the woman that he loves? Right. It makes no sense. So
to some people it makes no sense. Right. And that's the issue. Is for him, he was like, this is not what I'm comfortable with or what I'm used to. Right. And for other people who have had different experiences, public displays of affection is totally fine. Right. So, and I don't look at it as being feminine or masculine. It's being, I feel it's a sign of strength, being able to do that.
Right. I'm just saying, the actual, boiling it down to what's actually happening in the picture.
I see what you're saying.
What is gay about a man kissing his wife?
Right. Yeah. Oh, right.
Well, I think so. It's very clear that what he meant by the word was not the, like, stop. Right. He's not saying stop tagging me in pictures displaying homosexuality, because that's clearly not what was going on. Yeah. He was just using the word gay as an insult,
right,
and a slight against Justin's masculinity, because he felt like to not do so would be an attack on his masculinity.
Correct. Yes.
And that's, what a bummer. But the idea that he responded to the guy and said, hey, listen, I'd like to learn from you about what you see as, what's the problem here, is essentially what Justin was saying. And the guy was brave enough to say, here's exactly what the problem is. Because of the way I grew up, public displays of affection and promoting the fact that, not that just I had a public display of affection with my girlfriend, but I'm sharing this public display and making an even more public display by sharing it with my Instagram followers. That was the part where he was like, this makes me extremely uncomfortable because of how I was raised. And I felt like I had to react to it. And just Justin reaching out to the guy in a non-judgmental way to say, hey, I'd like to learn about this, was able to get some wheels going in this guy's head and gave him the space to talk about it in a completely honest way. And then gave him space to further not just talk about it, but change his behavior in a way that shortly after, he posted a picture of him proposing to his girlfriend on his social media. So the guy did a full 180, which is very impressive. And it all happened because Justin was willing to ask a question to say, hey, I'd like to understand you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great lesson to learn there, is that sometimes all you need to do, to really change a friend, a guy who, might be exhibiting some of these behaviors, is to just let him know, and whatever ability you have, that it's okay to talk about it. Like, I'm not gonna judge you negatively if you want to talk about how you're feeling about something, things like that. And Justin was able to do it, and it just goes to show. I mean, he just created that little, that friendly ear,
Right.
I don't even want to say safe space, because that, has sometimes some negative connotations these days, but just a friendly ear, a kindness, a saying, hey, I'm, this is okay. It allowed him to really, I mean, act, really, that's what he was really clearly looking for, so much so that he was able to, he just needed that was just the straw that really helped him, open up amazingly enough to be able to propose to his girlfriend.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that story. And I think it's a good example for a lot of us, that you can just say, okay, if somebody is reacting in a way where it looks like, okay, there's definitely something going on with them, where they're having a harsh reaction to something that should be, I mean, yeah, it's fair to say that guy was triggered by being tagged in that picture that Justin shared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it may have been a Brene Brown podcast where I heard, we there's a lot of sort of terms bouncing around in society right now that mean something to some people, mean something to another person. I think you and I maybe we'll do an episode on this at some point. Some of these words that are traditionally associated with the woke movement that are just being used a lot, and they're being used by a lot of people on both sort of sides of the political divide, where I get the impression that a lot of people on both sides don't even understand what the word means or what they think that it means.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there might be some value in us sort of dissecting some of these and saying,
yeah,
okay, here's what triggered means. Triggered means I'm feeling pain in the present from something that happened in the past. That's all that word means. There doesn't have to be, a lot of baggage with the word triggered, but there is when, politicians see the ability to use it to gain favor or clout or power. So, same with the word safe space. There's a lot of words where people are using them to either virtue signal or get clout or something like that, where they don't have to be that. We can actually open up that word and say, okay, here's where this word comes from. Here's what this word actually means. Here's what some people are using it for. And I think that the quality of our discourse in this country would be raised a lot if we could just sort of agree on what some of these words mean and why some of them sound upsetting.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem is these are words that weren't in our vocabularies individually up until we heard them, and then when we did hear them, they were in the context of something where that was upsetting to somebody at some point. And so then we're basically, we're using their definition, and which may not be accurate. Right. Which may not be accurate. And then again, as humans, we're inherently a little bit, trying to save energy. So we may not then take the time, unless it's really important for us, to go and look up that word in other areas and try to understand it fully. So yeah, let's I would love to get into that. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's definitely a matter of, I heard the other tribe use this word this way, and my tribe uses it this way. So I'm going to use it this way. I'm going to try to use it, turn it into a hammer to use on the other guys or gals,
Right. Yeah.
And I actually thought about this while I was traveling home from Texas, and there are some words. So this is just a little preview of a future episode. I don't know when Dan and I are going to do this, but words like patriarchy and
Mm-hmm.
privilege and white
Mm.
supremacy.
Oh, all good ones.
All good ones that have so much baggage. And I mean, I'm a little scared to get into an episode where we talk about some of these things because they can be messy. It
Yeah.
can evoke a lot of feelings in people. And um, I want to learn more about where these words come from, who's using them, why they're using them, how they're using them. And I'd like to get into that with you on some point and go into it with both of us realizing, okay, there are things about these words that make us feel a certain way. And there are absolutely in every case, there's more that we could know than we know today about these words and about where they came from. And yeah, I would again, it feels a little scary and a little dangerous, but I think that's why it would be fun to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be good. Really good.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the circling back, I really enjoyed this TED Talk. You and I shared a couple links to a couple different TED Talks, and we decided that this was the one we wanted to get into. And I think this is what we're going to continue doing for the next few weeks, is just finding really good, fairly popular TED Talks, or even just YouTube videos in a TED Talk like setting. They don't have to be, directly from TED, but where people are talking about masculinity and how it relates to modern day culture. And I'd like to get into those and talk about why we are where we are. Well, first, where we are and why we're here, and what, if anything, we would be better off as a society and as individual men from trying to see a little bit differently than we currently do.
Yeah, and he wraps up the TED Talk talking about how men typically love challenges and they love to really, dig into their bravery, their strength, their toughness. And I like the way he kind of, he uses that and says, listen, can we use those traits to really address something that makes us uncomfortable? And to me, you need to be tough to go through something that's uncomfortable, whether it's physically, emotionally, or mentally. And he talks about, hey, can we use some of that, that challenge to really, be vulnerable? Can you get through that uncomfortableness? Can you be tough enough to go through those feelings and actually be vulnerable and start to talk to somebody, or at least ask, if somebody is okay talking to you about things that make you uncomfortable, your feelings, stuff you're dealing with, your anxiety, and, and specifically, reaching out to another man for help, not just women. A lot of his followers were women, and he realized, a lot of his support online on social was women and not from men, until, he started to change the way he was posting some of his things. Right. And he's talking and basically posted more, more stereotypical, images of him like working out, or, things related to, typical masculinity, before he got more men following him. So I thought that was really insightful, and I'm glad he shared this. This is good. I learned quite a bit from this TED Talk.
Yeah, and I did like his conclusion about, talking about the necessary bravery and toughness that it takes to get into yourself and to understand yourself a little bit more. When I heard that, I thought, what, when I hear a guy like David Goggins talk about his ultra marathons, running 100 miles, that's like, man, that guy's tough. Or there's this guy I follow on Instagram who's a power lifter who's, putting 300 plus pounds over his head in an overhead press. I was like, that's tough. What else is tough? Sit on a therapist's couch and talk about a time when you did something that you really thought was going to impress your dad and he didn't give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about the anxiety that you have doing those physical things. Yeah, and then it's the same anxiety you're going to have feeling, about talking about things that you're not comfortable with.
Absolutely, and they will tax you and demand the same kind of grit and determination, and you will feel absolutely exhausted at the end of it, just like you do those other things. 100%.
But you should also be proud when you get it done.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's an important thing as well. So, all right, sir. I think,
Dan, I enjoyed this.
Things up.
Yep, I will look forward to talking to you either Friday or next Monday after. I'm going to be hitting the road and maybe doing another one of these remotely. But Yeah, I purchased a second decent quality microphone that now I've got one in my travel bag and I've got one at the camper so that I can give decent quality recordings wherever I happen to be in the world, whatever I happen to be doing.
That's right. And he's doing it all for you. And for us, if you could just go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review or any star review, any review would be welcome. We
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And as you'll hear in our intro and our outro every week, follow us on Instagram too if you want to see what kind of stuff Dan and I are up to doing together. We may need another trip to the cookie store, Dan. Crumble released their latest flavors last night. Every week they have 5 flavors that rotate and then their original chocolate chip. This week, I would definitely eat all 5 of the weekly flavors. They are all good. They all sound amazing. So I will forward that link to you, that post to you on Instagram.
Awesome.
And we may need to get together, meet at the Crumble store, and take some pictures of their cookies this week.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right, take it easy.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.